Thank you for your patience. We'd like to go on to the final program for the day. We would like to invite our President and CEO, Mr. Sawada, to take part in the general Q&A session. At the beginning, we will be providing a presentation briefly, after which we will take questions from all of you. So I would now like to invite Mr. Sawada to the podium. Mr. Sawada, please. Thank you for your kind introduction. Sawada is my name. Thank you for joining us despite your busy and demanding schedule. We appreciate your attendance at the NTT IR Day. Thank you so much. Well, our Senior Executive Vice President and the Senior Executive Vice President, as well as President of other affiliated companies, have already provided their explanation. They covered the transformation to a new management style and also NTT Group's new environment and energy vision. If I could just explain the significance of these initiatives in totality to all of you. I have prepared just one slide that talks about the overall significance. So, transformation to a new management style. We've been talking about 100 billion yen cost reduction in the past programs. By 2023, 200 billion yen will be added on top of this target. So that effect is already being envisioned. And also, one other point, this was also covered by the other presentation, the new environment and energy vision is envisioning minimal impact in terms of cost. That is for fiscal year 2023, by the way. And also, the NTT DOCOMO Group, the newly formed NTT DOCOMO Group, which the effective synergies in the newly formed NTT DOCOMO Group will be added on top of that. And the modified management strategy will probably involve and adjust the EPS target, which is currently under review. So that is the overall directionality which we have in mind. So that is the framework based on which the presentations were made. I hope that this will help to facilitate your understanding. And with that, I'm now ready to take your questions. Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Sawada. We'd now like to go on to the Q&A session. We will take questions about the program as a whole, as well as on other topics as well, in a very broad manner. So we hope that you'll participate. If you have a question, please push 0 followed by 1 on your phone. First question is from SMBC Nikko Securities, Mr. Kikuchi. Mr. Kikuchi, please take the floor. Thank you, Kikuchi here. Thank you for this opportunity. Actually, NTT DOCOMO and NTT Communications combination and new group strategy and its target for performance would have been covered by NTT IR Day. That would have been the central topic, I would imagine. But then, because of many backdrop, I'm sure that you are not able to do that. But can you talk about the current progress in terms of this? I know that. Also, what about the outlook of the MIC Advisory Council's report? If you could share with us the outlook on these points. That's my question. Yes, thank you for that. Well, the MIC, the Ministry of Internal Affairs and Communication, set up an independent advisory council as to whether or not there was any distortion in the administration. This involves Tohoku Shinsha Company and also NTT. Were there impact from meals of these two companies? That is now being studied by an independent third-party council. The result of this deliberation has not yet been publicized, but I would imagine that this will be compiled in not too distant a future. I would imagine that is the case. Now, of course, within the Ministry of Internal Affairs and Communication, MIC, they will discuss this, and they will probably compile the result of advisory discussions on the fair competition. So the third independent advisory council and also the study group, after their deliberation, and I would imagine that at that juncture we will have to consider our approach. It should not be too distant in the future, but then the political situation has been very fluid since the summer this year, so it is not yet clear as to what will happen on the political front. But I would imagine that it's probably not in too distant a future. That is my understanding. Mr. Kikuchi? Okay, thank you very much for that. Okay, in terms of the operation, well, various advisory councils and study groups are now being conducted, and you are awaiting their reports, I would imagine. I suppose that you probably have to wait for the report, but then what about operation strategy related items for where you don't have to wait for the results of this deliberation at the MIC? Is there anything that you're able to share with us on this front? Well, NTT Docomo and Communications and Comware, they have set up 7 working teams already, and they're already having discussions. They're already discussing various policies which they could pursue. For example, in terms of the corporate business, enterprise business, already, this has been the case up until now, but even more than ever, they are now beginning operations to further enhance their partnership. But then, what about we have to consider the conditions pertaining to fair condition. So we have to wait for the directionality of the fair condition discussion and then approach in an open manner. So I do apologize, but it's not that I don't want. You might have the impression that nothing is going on, but actually, in terms of preparation, we've already been carrying out various considerations and study in terms of in the context of preparation. Okay, thank you very much for that. That is all. That is all for my question. If there's time, I hope that I'll be able to take the floor a second time later on. Thank you.
ありがとうございました。それでは次。
Thank you very much, Mr. Kikuchi. We would like to move on to the next person. The next person is Mr. Masuno of Nomura Securities. Mr. Masuno, I have 2 questions. Earlier, there was one slide showing the points, out of which one is additional 200 billion yen cost reductions. From what will they be achieved? Listen to your explanation. The facility checking and diagnosis and 60,000 people in telecommunication construction firms. There seems to be a lot of potential for cost streamlining, but it was understood that time will be spent up until 2025 to make efficiency gains beyond this MTP time period. So I think there is more room for cost reductions after this 200 billion yen. So what are the contents of cost reductions and the time horizon? Can you explain? Yes, thank you for your question. Yes, as you point out, what I'm showing you today is 2023 200 billion yen. And against that, what Mr. Shibutani explained earlier was 2025. For example, on-site maintenance people being half, which means we will continue further beyond this 200 billion yen. And out of this 200 billion yen, about 10% is personnel expenses. The remaining 2%, out of which half, 50% is non-personnel expenses, and 40% is the facility and equipment expenses. And there was on-site discussion, but initially for IT, the existing IT will be changing into cloud, and the cloud will also have benefits. Of course, we will be shifting people. This can also have benefits. And on top of that, on-site and off-site work becoming remote will lower costs, and there will be cost reductions from automation. 2023 onwards, and instead of saying after 2023, once we are ready, even before then, we are thinking of offering to customers, which is not factored in today. That is because individual companies are going to yet build up in their business plan numbers going forward. As the holding company, we are now considering that aspect as a buffer. I see. But is that for customers? You mean to customers? Yes. For example, call center solution. In this manner, we want to provide a call center operation solution, including remote work, which means system and network can both be marketed And earlier you heard about running the car and capturing the facility condition automatically. In Tokyo 23 and in Tokyo, our facilities are already 3D and digitized. But under other infrastructure companies, they can be used. And if we incorporate their data and making understanding or capturing the current situation, making understanding easier and reducing failures and breakdowns for construction and facilities, our solutions are starting to be in use. So in this sense, broadly, there are customers we are providing to customers. That is what we mean. Thank you very much. And my second question is on this slide. Docomo and Docomo and communication synergy. Setting aside the question of when, but let's say we can immediately execute and looking throughout the industry, inclusive of other companies this fiscal year and next fiscal year, there are various solutions and network sales increasing and enterprise profits this fiscal year, next fiscal year in the real world is increasing a lot. Considering this background, and if you are going to work on the synergies in the newly formed Docomo Group, there will be proposals made, orders taken, there will be sales and profits booked. I think considering this sequence of events, you need more acceleration, inclusive product design. Even if you start it today, in what time period can you achieve in reality what is required? What is the time frame? I think there are two. One is commercial sales discussions. This is immediately possible. Once we agree today, we can start immediately. We have the preparations. If it is possible, it can be done to the full extent. But costs to move the organization and to activate the organization and to organize people or to integrate IT to lower costs, these efforts, what we have to clear the fair competition conditions, which require some lead time. But this was considered as a step 2 from the beginning. Next year, springtime, we said. So timing-wise, we may have some delays, but it's not going to be a big delay in any event in consideration of the original schedule. Certainly, sales-wise, sales activities can start from today or tomorrow, but the products and services to be sold and designing products, you have to start from scratch. That will take time. On that basis, what will happen? Yes, you're right. Initially, step 1, we said will be possible July, but this will become October. So a 3-month delay. Designing a new product together means, yes, a 3-month delay. But salespeople do not necessarily need new products. There can be existing products that can be cross-sold to Docomo customers. Communication service can be sold, or to communications customer Docomo products can be sold. There can be cross-sales that can start from today, tomorrow. This can be effective. I see.
はい。増野さん、ありがとうございます。
Thank you, Mr. Masuno. Let's go on to the next question then. Next question is from Tokyo Tokai Research Center, Ishino-san. Ishino-san, please go ahead. Thank you very much. I'm with Tokai Research Center. Ishino is my name. I would like to ask one question, if I may. It's about IOWN. The introduction of IOWN is going to, progress toward 2030. If that is the case, what will happen to the capex for group as a whole? What type of change will IOWN introduction have in terms of investment and capex on the part of NTT Group as a whole? And bearing that in mind, if this involves investment into semiconductors, then carbon neutral is going to be very difficult, because if you create carbon semiconductor to factory, this is going to require 240 billion yen amount of cost. So I think carbon zero, when you talk about carbon zero, what is the scope of carbon zero you have in mind? And what type of benefit will this bring on your group as a whole? Thank you for the question. First of all, what I talked about, the environment vision that I talked about, scope 3 is not yet reflected. It's not reflected. So in terms of production of semiconductors and the carbon thereof, and also in terms of factory operation required for semiconductor operation, this is outside the scope of our vision. That's the first point I wanted to make. So in 2030, what will happen to capex in fiscal year 2030? Well, in fiscal year 2026, rather, step 1, 2 for semiconductor white box, this will come out in 2026. That is the plan that we have. Now, naturally, we have to increase our capacity. In the case of servers, you have to replace these servers every 5 to 6 years. So if we're going to replace them, anyhow, we could do so at less cost. That's what we are considering. So therefore, that being the case, I don't believe that just because we have photovoltaic electronic convergence, you're not going to see enormous increase in cost. But then in the case of all photonics network APN, optical fiber, this is already being installed. All photonics network is already being installed as we speak. But can we have optical to optical connection on all fronts? That access network might require some reinvestment as well. But there are certain areas where the current conventional optical fiber could also be utilized. So by combining the two in the loop format, loop structure, maybe a new network architecture could be introduced by combining the two. So that being the case, capex on that front in relation to the aspect, how much will incur between the late 2020s up until 2030? That part is not yet clear. That is something that we're not able to assume and estimate at this juncture. And overall, software aspect will be increasing. ION involves both optical network and also the upper layer software application layer and also the middle layer software. It's a tri-layered structure. So if the percentage software increases, then the investment efficiency will improve with higher upper layer investment. Now, what happened to capex at this moment? We don't have that estimate available at this juncture. I hope I have answered your question. Yes, thank you very much for that.
石野さん、ありがとうございました。
Ishino-san, thank you very much. We should like to move on. The next person is UBS Securities, Mr. Takahashi. Mr. Takahashi, please. I have one question. I also want to ask about cost reduction, additional 200 billion yen, a confirmation question. Basically, this top-up part will be a top-up in profits as well? If not, what are the reasons that they cannot be realized as profits? Can you explain? Every time this becomes rather a discussion or a debate. Some is hypothetical. And there are some parts that are net actual. For instance, in yield, in IT, how much investments should be necessary, and to connect or maintain the current IT, how much investments are necessary? We don't have full estimation yet. So will 200 billion yen fully become completely profits or not? Not necessarily, not full. But this does not mean that there will be zero profits. So this is not a clear answer to you. Apologies. But I do not want to be erroneous. As of this stage, I cannot express well how much in real profits this will result in. In the midterm plan, we will incorporate the cost reductions in arriving at the EPS target. We would like to have some more time. I see. Thank you very much. Thank you.
高橋さん、ありがとうございました。
Thank you very much, Mr. Takahashi. Let us go on to the next question.
すみません、失礼いたしました。
Thank you. Are there any other questions? If not, we would like to welcome the second round of questions from the questionnaire as well. So if you have asked a question previously, you are now welcome to ask your second question as well.
次のご質問は、
Next question is from Daiwa Securities, Mr. Ando. Mr. Ando, please take the floor. Thank you very much. I would like to ask one question, if I may. You talked about carbon neutral. In the case of carbon neutral chart, and in the case of power consumption chart, any chart will be fine. But I believe at the time of press conference, you mentioned the 1/3 will be in relation to Docomo. You mentioned that 1/3 is being consumed by Docomo. That was the explanation you provided in your press conference. But when it comes to data centers, what about the percentage in relation to the data centers? And what about other buildings? Can you give us a breakdown? Can you give us a baseline breakdown? And based on that, if I could ask, for example, in fiscal year 2030 or in fiscal year 2040, in the outcome for these 2 years, what will happen to the breakdown between the two? And also, under your current plan, in what manner do you intend, in the plan that you have, what is the ultimate breakdown you have in mind? I would appreciate your insight. Thank you so much. Yes, thank you for your question. Well, it's not part of our disclosure. It's not the part of scope covered by our disclosure, but let me try to respond. So in terms of the overall outcome scenario, this outcome scenario is being calculated based on the macro level. So that, for example, when it comes to Docomo, or when it comes to entity East and West, entity limited, and entity data, the estimate is that the increase will apply to all companies across the board. Now, in actuality, that is not the case, but we have to take a look at this from a macro level. We have to estimate this based on a macro level and perspective. So that means that if we disaggregate the activities of each individual company, such estimate will be very, very difficult. So if we make Docomo 100, what will happen to 100 other companies? That is being worked out to a certain extent. In the case of entity, that should be probably around 50. And we are making calculation based on that assumption. So to rephrase this, in 2040, well, carbon neutral in 2040, and carbon neutral for Docomo in 2030, and carbon neutral for data center in 2030. These are targets. But aside from that, when it comes to the constituents and the elements of these targets, we have not yet been able to disaggregate that in great depth. Now, what about the data centers? I don't have the numbers on hand. Well, let me see. Maybe it's between anywhere from 10 to 20% of the whole. Maybe around 20% of the whole. I think that would be a safe estimate. Have I answered your question? Well, if that is the case, let me see. So you're not able to share with us the level of increase or growth among different business segments, right? So in the case of Docomo's data centers and networks, that will likely to decrease significantly. Is that the image that you have in mind? Would that be a safe estimate? Well, I suppose so, but let me put it this way. If there's going to be reduction, we're talking about power consumption reduction by 10%. I will come in later during the later phase. So in the case of renewables, this involves certificates, and also this will involve those that are contributed by entity unknown. And where to put that in? Where to reflect that? That's the issue. So by 2030, renewables, the amount of renewables that will procure, will that be prioritized for entity Docomo's data center? I think that is the way we are considering. So that is the way which you should interpret the scenario. I say thank you. I understand the structure now. Thank you very much.
はい、安藤さんありがとうございました。
Mr. Ando, thank you very much. Let us move on. The next person is Credit Suisse Securities, Mr. Eguchi. Mr. Eguchi, please take over. Thank you very much. Eguchi of Credit Suisse Securities. As to the contents that you presented earlier, we did not see any ROIC information. This time with the environment vision, we have Docomo story plus cost reduction. I think putting all these together, I think there are more cost increase aspects. But are you going to increase ROIC? What is going to be the direction of ROIC? Please explain. For ROIC, return on invested capital, there will be investments in anode. Mr. Shimada said 450 billion yen investment by anode. And then data centers, 200 billion yen level investment every year in continuation. In addition, urban solutions, urban development will require funds. We have to be conscious to make off balance and have partners so that the partners can participate and we can contain the investments and reduce asset size. Whilst demand is very strong, we are not in a structure that we can raise ROIC very high. We said 8% ROIC in the midterm plan 2030. But this 2023, we want to use this as a KPI for the individual companies. This is the stance we have. And I have another question, thank you. Today, we have heard very big goals about the environment and work style and lifestyle and the management style. And change of the awareness amongst the top management, I strongly feel. And impressing this to the people working in the field, penetration of this policy into the company, frontline people will be necessary in order to achieve the target as a company. And for you, midterm plan and long-term vision, what will become your challenge? From the top-down perspective, seen from the top management, what do you think is the biggest hurdle to achieve your plans and goals? Thank you very much for your question. Put bluntly, mindset. Yes, changing to the new mindset. And sustainable society, sustainable company, and work in life. To realize this has to be based upon the individual's mindset. The individuals need to want to achieve these. Speaking on a business management basis, if we start from top down, in the midterm plan, EPS is the main index. And to achieve these goals and targets, the LTI and STI are there. And then this need to percolate down to the next level managers. And from the higher level of the organization, we can manage KPI. But then from the bottom up, we need to change the mindsets, which will require time. We need to develop various systems and environments, and people need to understand and be convinced and take proactive action and work on their volition. We think this is the lever for the management. I see. Thank you very much.
はい、井口さんありがとうございました。
Thank you very much for the question. Let us go on to the next question. Next question is from SMBC Nikko Securities, Kikuchi-san. Mr. Kikuchi, the floor is yours. Please go ahead. Thank you very much. This is my second time. I appreciate it. I'd like to ask about energy business and the positioning thereof of your energy business. Within NTT Group, you want to use renewables for your self-power production. And also, you want to supply to Docomo Denki. And also, when it comes to customers such as 7-Eleven, you're also providing services to third parties. I suppose there are a lot of different possibilities. But in terms of your energy business operation, how much profit do you intend to generate from your energy business? And also in terms of in terms of 2030 and 2040, what will be the percentage of contribution from energy business vis-a-vis your revenues and profit? And also, what about the capex? Roughly, I think you're talking about 500 billion of capex. But how do you strike a balance? What do you have in mind? I would appreciate your insight. Yes, thank you for your question. Well, in terms of margin, when we take a look at the portfolio, I think the margin itself is not all that strong, maybe several percentage points. In the case of real estate, I think it will probably increase a little bit. But still, compared to mobile, the margin level is not as high. Then why would we embark on such a business to begin with? Why are we launching this business? For one thing, one major element is to create demand. What demand? We're talking about IT demand and network demand, and also in terms of urban solutions and urban setting, energy and building related business. These are all essential if we are to pursue urban solutions, and they are very effective tools. So when it comes to power, local production for local consumption, if we create such a power system together with local governments, this actually helps to create demand for IT network and data centers, because we'll be able to provide network IT and data centers in conjunction with such power service. So therefore, margin of the energy business per se may not be all that high, but then it can create demand, and it's a lever to generate new demand. The second point, as you pointed out by yourself, within our group, we want to pursue more green energy, and this could be provided as an added value to the society. And we want to leverage this as a model to contribute to our society. And the third point, if we can do this on our own internally, since there's so much demand for green energy in 2030 and 2040, so people with such insights internally will be able to contain cost. And the fourth point is sales and marketing. So consumer sales by Docomo, that's one thing. And also B2B services and supply by Ennet. We want to expand sales on these two fronts. So investment of roughly 500 billion per annum, and already we have a revenue of 300 billion yen per annum. If this could be doubled to 600 going forward, and if we can maintain with a margin that may not be high on its own, but if we could leverage this power business to translate into demand in other areas, I think that is a possibility. So that is what we have in mind. Thank you. Earlier, we asked a similar question, but when it comes to IOWN, this requires very little power consumption. This is something that you're emphasizing. I think this is something that you really want to promote because it uses very little power consumption. And energy might not be totally contradictory, but then capex to power business being pursued at the same time. Maybe I think you're being overly ambitious on both fronts. So as far as you're concerned, do you have any questions about pursuing both objectives at the same time? Well, in the case of renewables, we're very much interested, and I think we have to grasp the opportunity now if we are to embark on renewables, considering the bidding structure. And considering if we are to pursue and purchase conventional solar facility, it's really a competition now. And going forward, the competition will become even more intense when it comes to procurement of renewables. And also siting is going to be very important. Location and siting will be very important. So therefore, if you're going to acquire power plants with good location, you have to be really ahead of the curve if you are to do that. So that being the case, as was mentioned by Mr. Shimada earlier, up until 2030, we want to make sure that we embark on preparation of renewables power generation plant. That is the basis of our thinking. And the next stage comes expansion of IOWN. Now, to what extent will that be? What would the percentage of contribution of IOWN? Right now, we're talking about 50%, but I think there's always a room for change. Also, the percentage of IT operators like ourselves is actually only 2 to 3% of the overall picture. So if we can contain power usage, then it means that we'll be able to maintain our business in a more sustainable manner and in a more stable manner. So that being the case, this is something that we very much would like to tackle. That is our thinking. Are we being too greedy, too ambitious? No, thank you very much. Thank you very much for your response.
菊池さんありがとうございました。
Mr. Kikuchi, thank you very much. The next person, please. The next person is Nomura Securities, Mr. Masuno. Mr. Masuno, over to you. Yes, I also want to ask about energy and work style. Energy. So Docomo's sales of electricity to consumers, the electricity does not necessarily have to be green. Other companies are selling a lot of electricity and having sold to millions of households. And as business, the churn rate can be down and you can also earn margin from electricity. You should have gone into electricity business earlier by Docomo. But to what extent? In Docomo's number of households, you can aim for many number of households from Docomo scales. Green electricity and non-green electricity can penetrate into many households by Docomo. Do you expect to do business in such a big scale? And for your energy conservation own facilities, rather than buy from outside, having your own power plant will be better. But difficult to have supply, which means 3.8 billion. Is this the maximum as a limit? KDDI, looking at their electricity business, they have not made all the numbers open, but they seem to be providing to many customers and earning a lot of margin. We hear so, which means several tens of millions of yen we want to aim. This will be churn prevention and lock-in measure for customers because customer convenience can be provided. And I think basically should be green electricity. Product lineup will be prepared from now on. There can be various electricity models possible. And now energy conservation certificate is now 44%. The electricity operator has to purchase. This does not mean 3.8 billion kilowatt hour, which means we will have to purchase more. But there are many, many people who will be wanting to purchase good electricity or eco-friendly electricity. Are we going to purchase and use for in-house or not? We need to look at. But 3.8 billion is from the seeds side perspective and discussion so far. And my second question is work style. Various workplace distribution programs are ongoing. There was Shinagawa initiative I heard about, which means your real estate urban solution business. What will happen to this business? What is the future view of this business when the work style changes in the future, offices and real estate? How do you intend to design business? What is going to be the business scale and redevelopment? Will the business be the same as in the past or will the business be different? Will business be greater or change in shape? When the whole society's work style changes, if we assume so, your real estate redevelopment business, what will happen to this business? Thank you for your question. Yes, the sense of direction can be two different directions. We intend to go for network side, and we want to lead into this direction. We want to change work style to remote, and we want to practice ourselves like that. And of course, there will be more real physical work as well, which means the urban solutions market will become smaller as a structure. But looking at ourselves, we want to increase the office space per person 1.5 times. In addition, meeting rooms and common web studios are created, which means for ourselves, offices, maybe 30% space reduction in the cities. This is what we consider for ourselves, which means for urban solutions, and for real estate business in general, we should say that real estate will be more distributed. There can be satellite offices and regional offices. Such office demand will be there. But then office demand in the central cities can be tens of percentages down. In the case of our company, 30% down, and companies with less remote work, maybe 10-20%, which means we'll be balancing after all. This is our view. Thank you very much.
はい、増野さんありがとうございました。
Thank you very much, Mr. Masuno. Let us go on to the next question then. Next question, please. Next question is from Morgan Stanley UFG Securities, Mr. Tsusaka. Mr. Tsusaka, the floor is yours. Thank you. Tsusaka here. I hope you can hear my voice. Yes, we hear you. Thank you very much. Go ahead. Yes, thank you. I wanted to ask one question about the consumer-oriented business, and the second point relates to the balance sheet. Well, I'm afraid I was not able to listen to the whole part of the presentation during the IR day. I do apologize if I asked something that was already covered earlier. But when it comes to the consumer business, you talked about power business earlier. NTT Docomo is now going through a major transformation, and we will see great momentum. That is very clear. On the other hand, though, other companies are also moving at a very rapid pace. They're also transforming the business at a very rapid pace as well. So, for example, we see competition of mobile shifting to low price range. And also in the case of power, from early on, your competition has already been embarked on retail power business. So, Mr. Sawada, when you take a look at Docomo's consumer business, how competitive are they? How do you assess the competitiveness? Are they improving? Are you satisfied with the competitiveness of Docomo in terms of the consumer business? Or, to the contrary, do you believe that there are some insufficiencies? And are there any things that you want to change when it comes to the competitiveness of Docomo? So can you talk about the competitiveness of consumer business for NTT Group as a whole? I would appreciate your insight. Yes, thank you for your question. If you ask me if I'm satisfied, well, I'm not satisfied. But at the same time, they have gone through significant improvement. They have improved significantly, and they've really worked at great depth as well. So, for example, be it XR or be it handsets or be it wearable devices, they're engaged on new domains. And also, in terms of the mobile services, low usage customers and transitioning a shift and migration of low usage feature phone customers to smartphones, and also FMC fixed mobile convergence, and also home 5G. All of these are very positive. So home gateway and homeland, could that be really created to provide greater added value? That type of initiative is ongoing. Also based on this platform, on top of this platform, smart life services are not being provided by Docomo, and other companies are also offering payment services as well on their platform. So I think there's competition, inclusive of contents. Hopefully, Docomo will further promote their efforts. So that is my thinking, and that is my wish. And also, what about the global business? On the global front, B2C payment and also smart life business. And also, what we're at the top of our presentation today, which was covered by Mr. Hiroyo of Docomo, the Kabonyu, for example. So community services, hopefully they will also spread on a global basis. So there are a lot of challenges which they could pursue at Docomo. And I would imagine that Docomo will indeed be tackling these challenges going forward. And I have a lot of expectation. I hope I have answered your question. Yes, thank you very much. Next, I would like to ask about your balance sheet. And naturally, as Docomo is now a wholly owned subsidiary firm, balance sheet has expanded, and leverage has increased as a result of incorporating Docomo as part of your balance sheet. And you will be paying from ordinary cash flow. If that is the case, then that means that you cannot have a major scale cleanup of your balance sheet all that quickly. But on the other hand, in the case of assets, there are a lot of options you could introduce. You could also take many things off balance. So there are a lot of options that you're able to deploy. So the balance sheet, which has really expanded on your part, are there efficiencies that you are able to implement at this juncture? If there are any ideas you have in mind, I would appreciate your sharing that with us. And there are a lot of news There are a lot of use flow, but then it seems that the amount for each use is not all that voluminous. So, do you believe that a more fundamental overhaul could be undertaken? Well, I'm not sure whether or not this is an overhaul. I think it's a combination of many options and many policies. For example, return on invested capital (ROIC) is part of our goal, but also compressing our assets. This is something that we do take interest in. Now, naturally, when it comes to the working capital, we are starting initiatives to reduce this as well. But the conventional assets that we have and Docomo's credit assets are now being taken off balance, and that initiative will be pursued in a continuous manner. And also, when it comes to data centers, already 1/3 of the investment is now being done in conjunction with other partners. So therefore, the volume of assets that we're acquiring with our own money has been reduced. And also, in certain cases, we'll consider the selling of some assets. So taking assets off balance. This also applies to real estate as well. Now, can we shift totally to flow-based management? That is probably not viable. But to a certain degree, we'll be able to sell assets, and using that money, we can invest. So that model we would like to achieve, and we would like to make efforts to realize such a model. And also, when it comes to facilities, this is something which we have not yet embarked on, but this applies to the tower business as well. But to what extent could we take facilities off balance? That is an issue that we should be addressing going forward. I hope I have answered your question. Thank you. Thank you very much.
はい、津坂さんありがとうございます。
Mr. Tsaka, thank you very much. Next person, please. The next person is Citigroup Securities. Mr. Tsuruo. Mr. Tsuruo, please. Maybe you are on mute. Tsuruo-san, we don't hear you. Sorry, many apologies. How is it now? It's now we hear you now. Many apologies. A lot of the questions are already covered. Sorry, my question is now like this. The power source mix in renewables, what is your thoughts? If you have numbers, solar, offshore wind, if you have any breakdown determined, what are your policies and thoughts behind? And then the other question I have is 450 billion investments exist. And this may include storage batteries. What is the breakdown of the 450 billion investments? Thank you for your questions. First of all, renewables. In reality, practically speaking, majority will be solar. But wind and offshore wind is also within our scope. If this part is also taken into consideration, 80% solar, others 20%, I think that is going to be the level more or so. We don't have a clear breakdown. Maybe we need to check with Mr. Takama. What is going to be the percentage breakdown? I don't have the portfolio myself as of now. And then you ask about the 450 billion contents. In this sense, storage battery is not fully included. But storage battery, today we have lead, and lead should be replaced. And currently included in other capex, which means there can be more spending, but main will be solar. I hope this answered your question. Yes, solar is relatively less risk area. This is how I took it. Thank you. Thank you, Tsuruo-san.
こちらで
I think these are all the questions we've received from people who have raised their hands. Is there anyone else with a question? These are all the questions which we have received from people who indicated that they have questions. So if there aren't any other questions, then with this, we will conclude the general Q&A session at this juncture. Thank you very much, Mr. Sawada. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.